It was a hot Saturday afternoon when 12-year-old Malik walked down the cracked sidewalk, the familiar weight of a basketball tucked under his arm. He had just finished a pickup game at the local park, the sun still high in the sky, and his mind was on nothing more than a quick snack and maybe a few minutes of his favorite TV show before dinner. He dribbled the ball in rhythm as he made his way home, the sound of the bounce echoing off the walls of the row houses lining the street. As he rounded the corner by the corner store, he noticed a police car parked on the curb. 2 officers were standing near it, leaning against the patrol vehicle, their radios crackling softly. Malik wasn't unfamiliar with cops, but he always tried to avoid them. He knew that in his neighborhood, police had a habit of stopping young black boys like him for no reason at all. He tried to keep his head down, but the taller officer, a man in his mid-30s with a brash demeanor, spotted Malik and waved him over. Malik's stomach tightened, but he walked toward them, trying to stay calm. "Hey, kid," the officer called, his voice rough, as if he already expected trouble. "What you up to? You look like you're in a hurry." Malik looked up, his expression neutral. "Just heading home, sir." "Played a game at the park?" The officer gave him a once-over, as if sizing him up, then raised an eyebrow. "Is that right?" He stepped closer. "So, you know what's going on in this neighborhood? You aware of all the trouble around here?" Malik didn't respond immediately. He wasn't about to argue with a cop, not over something so trivial. But then the officer smirked and leaned forward. "You know," he said, the sarcasm clear in his voice, "you sure don't look like the kind of kid who plays basketball at the park." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "What's your dad do, huh? Probably something important, right?" Malik's face remained calm. "My dad's in the Special Forces," he said, his voice steady. He had heard people doubt his dad's work before, but it didn't bother him. His father had served for years, and Malik was proud of him. The officer let out a loud, mocking laugh, the sound grating against Malik's ears. "Special Forces?" The officer scoffed, turning to his partner, who had been standing off to the side. "Yeah, right, kid. Your dad's probably just some guy who wears a uniform. You're telling me your dad's out there saving the world?" The other officer chuckled, too, both of them now openly laughing at Malik's claim. "Come on, kid," the officer said. "We've heard it all. Special Forces? That's a new one." He gave Malik a mock salute. "Tell you what, why don't you call your dad and tell him we said hi?" Malik's face flushed. His chest tightened with frustration, but he kept his voice level. "I'm telling you the truth," he repeated, looking the officer squarely in the eye. "You can check it out if you want." The officer didn't take him seriously. "Yeah, sure we will," he said, still laughing. "Just don't go making up stories about people like that. You might get yourself into more trouble than you can handle." Malik felt the sting of the words, but he didn't back down. He kept his gaze fixed on the officer, refusing to let the mockery break him. But inside, something shifted. He knew they didn't believe him. He knew they thought he was just another kid from the neighborhood trying to make himself look important. What he didn't expect was that in just a few minutes, everything would change. As the officers continued to laugh, Malik could feel the heat rising in his chest. His palms were sweaty, and his fingers tightened around the basketball, but he didn't want to make a scene. The last thing he wanted was for things to escalate. He knew how quickly situations could spiral when cops were involved. "You think this is funny?" Malik asked, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "You're making fun of my dad, but he's really out there. He's doing something that actually matters." The taller officer waved him off dismissively. "Sure, kid. Whatever you say. Maybe you'll tell us all about it when we get your dad here." Malik opened his mouth to say something else, but before he could speak, a black SUV turned the corner and pulled up to the curb. The officers glanced at each other, their grins slowly fading. The door of the vehicle opened, and out stepped a tall man, dressed in military fatigues, his posture straight and commanding. His boots hit the pavement with authority, and his presence seemed to cut through the tension in the air like a knife. Malik's heart skipped a beat as the man walked toward them, He recognized him immediately. His dad. The two officers stood there in stunned silence, caught completely off guard. The officer who had mocked Malik earlier looked visibly shaken, as if he had just realized the gravity of the situation. Malik's dad, standing tall and composed, approached the officers with a calm intensity that spoke volumes about his experience. "Is there a problem here, officers?" Malik's dad asked, his voice smooth and firm, carrying the weight of his rank. The officer who had laughed at Malik hesitated, suddenly fumbling for words. No, sir. We were just talking to the kid here." "You were mocking my son," Malik's dad interjected, his voice sharp now, cutting through the officer's stammer. He glanced at Malik, who stood there, still clutching his basketball. "I think it's time you both explained yourselves." The taller officer opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The younger officer, who had been quiet up until then, looked down at the ground, avoiding eye contact. It was clear that they were both caught, realizing they had seriously misjudged the situation. Malik's dad didn't raise his voice, but there was an unmistakable authority in the way he spoke. "You both made assumptions about my son because of his age and the color of his skin. And you didn't stop to think for even a second that what you were doing was wrong." The officers shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of their depth now that the truth had come to light. The taller officer took a step back, muttering an apology, but it felt hollow. Malik's dad turned back to him, his expression softening. "Malik, you did the right thing. You stood your ground." He gave his son a proud smile, one that made Malik feel like the embarrassment and frustration of the earlier moment had never happened. "Let's go home," his dad said, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder and guiding him toward the SUV. The officers watched in silence as they walked away, the weight of their actions now fully realized. The taller officer, his face flushed with humiliation, didn't dare speak again. As Malik got into the SUV, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling in his chest. His dad, the man who had been serving in the Special Forces for years, had just set the record straight in the most powerful way possible. He hadn't needed to yell or fight back. He had just walked in and made the truth undeniable. "Thanks, Dad," Malik said as the door closed, looking up at the man who had just shown him what it meant to stand up for yourself with dignity.